So we are overviewing the mimer, what we've done so far. So this is a mimer of Yud Shvat, Tafshin Yud Tes. This is, of course, a Basi Ligani, as all the Maimarim of Yud Shvat are Basi Liganis. They're all focusing on the mimer of the Rebbe Rayatz, the original Basi Ligani, which actually the Rebbe Rayatz said in the Pays, meaning many years before. And now, in honor of beautiful date of the 10th of Shvat, the passing of his grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka, and the 13th of Shvat, the passing of his mother, he is releasing, as we would call it, re-releasing this mimer that he had said in Russia many years before, with very strong, intense hashgacha pratis. That original Basi Ligani was the first mimer the Rebbe ever heard from the Rebbe Rayatz. So this is Tafshin Yud Tes. We're now in the 9th section of this mimer of the Rebbe Rayatz, meaning it's a 20-section mimer, and over 20 years, the Rebbe, mimer by mimer, unfolds the mimer, and then the Rebbe started a second time. Now we're on the third time. Thus far in the mimer, we've been focusing on the construction of the Mishkan, and how the Mishkan is from Atzei Shittim, translated as acacia wood. But when we look at it, we look at the Hebrew word Shittim, and we say the root, the etymology, the root word of Shittim is the word shtus. Shtus, folly, foolishness. Because the function of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, was to take the shtus of this world, the foolishness of this world, and transform it, the same quality of not being rational, but instead of this world shtus, which is lower than intellect, lower than reason, lower than seichel, to have a shtus for Hashem, to serve Hashem where it makes no sense. You don't have to be so bounded up by sense that you only do what's rational in serving Hashem. No, we're crazy, We go beyond what's rational. We just serve Hashem. So that's in essence what all of our service is supposed to be, transforming from the lower shtus, the shtus of this world, the shtus below seichel, to this higher shtus, super-rational shtus, serving Hashem beyond seichel, beyond reason. And this is very much focused on in the words of the planks of wood that were the structure of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. And in the Torah, those planks of wood are called krushim, these standing krushim. And the Rebbe says, well, the word keresh in Hebrew, if you jumble the letters, you get sheker. If you jumble the letters another way, you get kesher. Sheker means falseness, kesher means bond. So through these planks of wood, so to speak, meaning through the service that we're doing to Hashem, that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, symbolizes, we're again transforming the sheker of this world, the falseness of the world, and we're actually making ksharim. We're binding up this world to God. So this world looks like a world of a lot of falseness. It is a world of a lot of falseness, trust me. In case you don't realize yourself, you could just trust me on that one. This world is a world of a lot of sheker. But this world is Hashem's world. This is the world that we're supposed to give to Hashem. So when we use this world for Hashem, when we get past the shekarim, the falseness of this world, and we serve Hashem with this world, we actually kesher, we actually bind up this world to God. That's the point of our service. And as I said, these krushim, these planks of wood, are omdim, they're standing, which the Rebbe connects to the idea of amudim, the pillars. And pillars is a metaphor, it's a mashal for the mitzvahs. That we're told there are 613 mitzvahs, plus 7 mitzvahs midrabanan. You could say 7 mitzvahs midrabanan. There's thousands of mitzvahs midrabanan. There are. But the thousands are all extensions of protections to the mitzvahs of the Torah. Mitzvahs of the Araisa. But there are 7 independent mitzvahs of the rabbis that have nothing to do with any mitzvah, so to speak. It just came from them. So those are the 7. 613 biblical, and 7 of the rabbis is 620. 620 is the numerical value of keser, the crown. So the mitzvahs are enrooted in the keser, Hashem's crown, and they go all the way down to planet Earth. And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, we said in this mimer we're going to reference every Rebbe by name and by teaching. So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya speaks of these mitzvahs as these amudim, as these pillars. But when he speaks of them, when he speaks of the mitzvahs, he speaks of how they're enrooted above in the highest heavens and come all the way down below. When he speaks of the pillars, muscle for them, he speaks of how the pillars are enrooted in the ground and go all the way up to support the structure of this fabulous building. So the Rebbe questions this. Why do we see this difference that the mitzvahs are enrooted, they're fixed above, and the pillars are fixed below? The Rebbe also questions the language of the Rebbe Rayatz in Basi Ligani, that the Rebbe Rayatz says that the krushim are al derech, they're similar to the mitzvahs. And the Rebbe says, wait a minute, al derech, they're like the mitzvahs or not? Al derech seems to imply they're not exactly the same. And the Rebbe says we see the same point because the mitzvahs, we're told, are mamshichim u'machabrim. They draw down and fuse this world with the infinity of Hashem. But the krashim aren't mamshichim and machabrim. They're only machabrim. They fuse this world to the Ein Sof. They don't draw down the Ein Sof to this world. So why? Why the difference that the krashim are only al derech, the mitzvahs, that the krashim aren't mamshich, they're only mechaber, that the pillars are fixed in the ground while the mitzvahs are fixed in the heavens? Let's understand these questions. More important than the question, of course, is the answers. So first the Rebbe starts speaking about the difference between the pillars fixed in the ground and the mitzvahs fixed in the heaven. And the Rebbe here develops a very important point that's very thematic to this mimer, which is, again, we're just saying this all very briefly, of course, that this physical world was created by Atzmus and Mahus. That spirituality can't create a physical reality. Spirituality has nothing to do with a physical reality. So all of the spiritual realities is spirituality shrinks and creates another level of spirituality, which shrinks and creates another level of spirituality, which shrinks, you get the point. I mean, you came to the most shrunken state of spirituality, you can't get physicality. Physicality doesn't come from spirituality. What created physicality? Atzmus Mahus, the essence of Hashem. Only the essence of Hashem can create physicality. And that's why this world has such a sense of I exist. Like, don't start up with me. I. Everything in this world has a big I. Even like, a stone has a big I. I exist. I created myself. Rebbe says for this very deep mystical secret. Because this world is created by Atzmus and Mahus, by the essence and being of Hashem. So since it's from the essence and being of Hashem, everything in it has this sense of I, as ultimately the Eibishter is the only real I. The Eibishter is the only, nothing preceded him. And every piece of creation of physicality feels nothing preceded me. I exist. I came into being myself. Is that good? That's a great question, Chavi. It's actually, not surprising for Chavi, a very hard question to answer. It's a deep question. In essence, no. But sort of, yes. That's what you do with a deep question. You give an ambiguous answer. Learn this tip. What do I mean by that? No, it's not good for something to think, I created myself. We want everything to be nullified and say, I come from Hashem. So we're saying, very interestingly, that Gashmi as a physicality has less innate nullification to Hashem than any spiritual reality. Because all spiritual realities recognize they come from the Eibishter. And only physicality, that actually is the only thing that comes from the essence of being from the Eibishter, it has the least bittul. It has the least awareness, so to speak, of Hashem's reality. It has the most, I created myself. So that's not good. On the other hand, the fact that Hashem is invested in physicality, which is why it has this ego, if you want to use that term for it, that's amazing. Because that means that physicality has so much power. It has power like nothing in all the spiritual realities. Ignorant people think like, oh, malachim, angels, whoa, that's intense, that's holy, that's spiritual. No. There's much more of Hashem's energy invested in a blade of grass than in a malach. Like, this is the world where it's at. This is the world where everything is like nova supercharged. In a very personal level, more than anything else in this world, we look at our own bodies. Now, our bodies are even more charged than everything else in this physical world, to be honest. Everything in this physical world comes from the essence and being of Hashem, which blows your mind. But our bodies not only come from the essence and being of Hashem, but they were selected and chosen by Hashem. They were chosen by Hashem with his bechira chavshis, with his essence choice. So they're even more an expression of the essence and being of Hashem. And as such, we're told that by Mashiach, the energy of the body will feed our souls. Meaning, it sounds weird to say, but from a certain perspective, the body has more energy than the soul does. Because the body's from the Atzmos. The body's the Bechira Chavshis of the Eibishter, Bechira Atzmis. So everything in this world having this sense of self that almost like is a negation of Hashem's self isn't great in terms of bittul, but is great in terms of showing how powerful everything is. Now, why do I care if something is powerful? Okay, maybe my body, but why do I care about anything else? Because anytime I use this world for Hashem, I'm extracting that power. I'm lifting it up. I'm giving it back to Hashem. Like we said, keresh, the planks of wood, is the same letters as kesher, bonds. So if I use my phone, this is my house phone. I almost never use my house phone, but I just happen to be using my house phone because my husband was using my cell. So have a house phone. You might need it someday. So I was learning Torah on this house phone. So this is a piece of probably primarily plastic. But this plastic has enormous energy in it. It's from Hashem's essence and being. Well, I took that enormous energy and I just gave it to Hashem because I lifted it up and I used it as a vehicle for Torah. So from that perspective, I'm very happy this phone comes from the Atzmos Malchus of Hashem himself. Because if the energy was from a weaker level, not of God, but of godliness, not of Atzmos Malchus, Hashem's essence and being, but of Elokus, so I'd also be lifting up that Elokus to Hashem when I use the phone for Torah. But it would be a weaker energy because it's starting off weaker. So in the end of the day, the fact that this world is from Atzmos Malchus is beneficial. Even though it might be a bit challenging, but it is also beneficial. Thank you for your deep, complex question. No surprise there. All right, so that was in the middle of our overview. Leah, thank you. So glad you joined. We're in the middle of overviewing the Mimer thus far. So based on all this, we're answering why, when we're talking about the pillars, when the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, as a mashal, as the parable, the metaphor for the mitzvos, he speaks of the pillars, and he speaks of the pillars like fixed in the earth. But that's not the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs he speaks of as like fixed in the heavens. But the pillars are fixed in the earth. So why? Well, now, so to speak, it's sort of obvious. Because if we're talking about pillars, if we're talking about something physical, the more physical it is, the better. Because it's like, well, physical is Atzmos Malchus, is the essence and being of Hashem. So the more physical, the more of Hashem's Atzmos Malchus is invested. So if I want to talk about the real core power of the pillar, I'm talking about where it's most earthbound, fixed in that earth. But that works in the mashal, it doesn't work in the nimshal. That's not true for the mitzvahs. Because the mitzvahs are not physical. I mean, you can say, what? I'm a physical human being. I do mitzvahs all the time. They're very physical. My manifestation of them is physical. The mitzvah itself is the Ratzon Elyon, is the supernal will of Hashem. So the mitzvah, not my physical manifestation of the mitzvah, the mitzvah herself, that beam from the highest heights to all the way down to planet Earth, that energy of the mitzvah is spiritual energy. So spiritual energy doesn't grow when it gets lower and lower. It shrinks when it gets lower and lower. Spiritual energy is at her most spiritual when she's at her highest height. So if I want to speak about the greatest level with the mitzvah, she's fixed in the highest heavens. Essence of Hashem. Koseres, the capital. I think that'll be how they translate it in English. The capital of that structure, the crown of that structure. That's where the mitzvah is fixed. That's her point of height. But the pillar, the mashal, the parable, the physical thing, oh, her highest point is when she's fixed in the ground, when she's most earthbound. So that's where there's this difference. And again, you could say, well, what do I care? But answering Chavi's question, we understand why we care. Because it's such a way to open up our eyes and look at our world and understand the potential of our world, understand the power of our world, and understand how we are such amazing movers and shakers of these energies. Because every time we serve Hashem with them, wow, we are shifting enormous powers. I mean, of course, conversely, if it went in the wrong direction, it wouldn't be too great. But every time we're doing right, we're truly moving huge energies. The Rebbe went on to speak at length, now quoting from the Mitzvah Rebbe, 3 Mishalim to really express this idea that we see something's power when it can go really low. Like the Rebbe gave 3 very different types of Mishalim, but all coming back to the same point. Like one of the Mishalim was, if you have a great fire, a great light burning, how do you know if it's really great? If you're really far from it and it still illuminates. Or if you have this bucket full of whatever, water, wine, how do you know when the bucket is really full? When it overflows. So those overflowing drops are tiny drops, and in essence, they're lost. They're not in the bucket anymore. So they're like the lowest element, but they show how full the bucket is. So when something is really going down, that's a sign of its power, which in our perspective, of course, is circling back to this concept that when Hashem's energy goes all the way down to physicality, whoa, this is, as we're saying, a tremendous testimony to this energy of Hashem. And with all of this, again, skipping much, we understand the difference between the mitzvahs and the krushim. Again, where do we see there was a difference? Because the Rebbe Rayatz in Basi Ligani, the original Basi Ligani of Tafshin Yud, he says the krushim are al derech the mitzvahs. They're similar to the mitzvahs, which means they're not the mitzvahs. And when he's describing what each one does, he said the krushim are mechabrim. They fuse the Ein Sof to this world. But he doesn't say they're mamshich the Ein Sof. And when he's describing the mitzvahs, he says the mitzvahs are mamshichim umachabrim. They draw down the Ein Sof and they fuse the Ein Sof to this world. So why the difference? So the Rebbe said, again, obviously this is an overview and I skip much because otherwise we would just be reteaching everything. So getting to this point, which is, I believe, exactly what we're up to. We're up to Ois Hey. So let's look now in detail in Ois Hey to understand this question. The difference between the krushim, the planks of wood in the Mishkan, again, it's what they symbolically represent, and the mitzvahs, that the mitzvahs have a power that the krushim don't. The mitzvahs can be mamshich. They draw down the Ein Sof, and the krushim don't draw down. They fuse the Ein Sof to this world, but they can't draw it down. Only the mitzvahs can. Because the krushim symbolize the avodah of the Mishkan. And the avodah of the Mishkan, the service in the tabernacle, is spiritual. When we're doing the avodah of the Mishkan, it's a spiritual service. Just like in the Beis Hamikdash, they offered up karbanos, they took animals and they burnt them and they offered them to the Eibishter, they offered them to Hashem, to God. We offer up our animal soul. And we have the fires, the godly fires from our godly soul. And with these fires, we burn out the impurities of our body and our animal soul. And that's our Mishkan. Every one of us, every one of us is a miniature mikdash, is a miniature tabernacle, is a miniature mikdash, is a home for Hashem. How are we Hashem's home? Through our spiritual avodah, through our spiritual service. So the krushim symbolize the structure of the tabernacle, in me. This is my spiritual avodah. It's like we've been saying since the beginning of this mimer. I'm supposed to, instead of being a normative person in this world that falls under the shtus, the follies of this world, I'm supposed to transform that to shtus of kedusha, to a super rational service of Hashem. This is a very spiritual service. That sounds very good. But based on this mimer, the vantage points of this mimer, it's limited. Again, spiritual is great. Spiritual is wonderful. But we're saying this mimer, spiritual is more limited than physical. Because physical, there you have Atzmos Mahus. There you've got the real deal. You've got the real energies of God. But the krushim are not doing a physical service. As we embody the krushim, as we are doing the avodah of the Mishkan, it's a purely spiritual service. Such a service is not powerful enough to be mamshech the Ein Sof into this world. We can't draw it down into this world. We can mechaber the Ein Sof with the world. We can fuse godliness with the world through our spiritual service. But we can't draw it down. But the mitzvahs, now again, we just finished saying the mitzvahs in themselves are spiritual energies. They are. But I'm a physical human being. And every single mitzvah I do is physical. Now, some mitzvahs are more physical than others, of course. If I'm having Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, that's less physical than if obviously I'm going to give the classical example, than if I'm giving something to tzedakah, or eating kosher, or making my clothing modest. But those are really using the physical. But even those other mitzvahs are really supposed to have a physical component. Like, well, how does Avos Hashem or Yiras Hashem or a Tainug in Hashem have a physical component? These are also spiritual services. Well, of course, they are spiritual services. But I'm a physical human being. So as a physical human being, the way they're expressed in me has to be physical. Meaning, it says if someone is really scared, they get verkvetched, they shrink. There's a story, I don't remember where the story is brought in Chassidus. There was like some fire in Lubavitch, and someone like was so, scared, he like snuck, he somehow got into this crevice or something, some natural whatever, or a piece of wood to protect him from the fire. But after the fire was over, they couldn't get him out. Because he was so farkvesh, he was so shrunken, he was so from the fire that he literally fit into a place where his physical body couldn't fit. So after the fire, his physical body wasn't scared anymore and it couldn't get out. It expanded too much. That, the Rebbe says, is what's supposed to happen to us when we fear Hashem. When we fear Hashem, it's supposed to farkvetch us. We're supposed to, in our physical body, have a physical response because of our fear of Hashem. And conversely, we know that Rav Nachum Chernobyl famously was fat. That's not such a positive word nowadays, but in previous generations, it was a very positive word. Was fat from the pleasure he had in saying Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. His physical body expanded from that pleasure. I think it says in the Gemara about Vespasian that when he would, remember this famous incident where Rabbi Yochanan Harkness comes to him and says he's the Caesar and to save the line of David HaMelech, of Mashiach, and when he heard the news that I'm sure you all know the famous story in the Gemara, and he says, well, if I'm the king, it's Merida B'Malchus to say I'm the king, and if I am the king, how come you only came now, and whatever. Other things went back and forth in this dialogue, and then in the middle of this, he gets the news from Rome that the previous Caesar, I don't know, probably got knocked off, whatever happened, maybe he died a natural cause, surprisingly enough, and he was appointed by the Senate to be the next Caesar of Rome. I don't remember, probably you all know the story, so maybe you can remember better than me. He was putting his boot on, he was taking his boot off, he somehow had like a foot in a boot, and he couldn't get it out, because he heard the news, his body swelled. The tainug, the pleasure, the delight, I'm now the ruler of the world, literally made his foot too big for the boot. So similarly, now these were natural reactions, but that's what's supposed to happen to us. Our tainug in the Eibishter, our pleasure and delight in doing another Jew a favor and being able to daven or say Tehillim, or the delight in learning, it's supposed to literally affect us in a bodily way. When we love someone, there's a harchava, there's a broadening of self in the sensation of love. When we're loving Hashem, when we're loving Klal Yisrael, when we're loving Eretz Yisrael, when we're loving Torah, there's supposed to be this physical broadening inside of us because of the power of that love. So why is the Rebbe going into all this? Because he wants to show us that even the most spiritual mitzvahs in the end of the day affect in a physical fashion, which is very good, which we're happy about, because we're saying of the power of the physical. That's, again, this is a great mimer for women to learn, You're doing a lot of physical stuff. Here's the power. We have the power. The power is in the physical. And even the most spiritual mitzvah is going to affect you, or should affect you. We want it to affect you physically. How do you know you're really loving Hashem? There should be a physical change in your heart. You should feel the stretching. How do you know you're fearing? There should be a physical limiting. How do you know you're having this pleasure? There should be a physical extension, fat. And for sure, in all the other mitzvahs that are dealing with a physical, straight up, we understand how the mitzvahs are, again, not in their essence. We were just talking about how the mitzvahs are spiritual in their essence. But as they are fulfilled on planet Earth, every mitzvah has a physical piece to it. I'm a physical person, a soul, but in a body. All my mitzvahs are physical. And that's great, because that means they have enormous power because of the power we've been discussing the physical has. So the keresh, the tabernacle, is my spiritual avodah. My spiritual avodah is great. It does connect godliness to this world. It does. Of course it does. But it doesn't have the power to be mamshech atzmos umahus. Ein sof. It is mamshech. It does draw down godliness. You shouldn't feel like, oh, so what am I bothering for? It does draw down godliness. It draws down the godliness from chesed of atzilus. It's godliness. That's very high godliness. It's incredibly high godliness. But not Ein Sof. To get to Ein Sof, to get to Hashem's essence and being and that energy, for that you need a mitzvah. For that you need physical. And that's the point the Rebbe Rayatz is saying in a very subtle way. You need the Rebbe's magnifying glass to open this all up to even have the question to give us the answer. That's what the Rebbe Rayatz is saying, that the mitzvah is mamshech and mechaber the Ein Sof to the Eilamais. But the krushim are mechaber the Ein Sof to the Eilamais. My spiritual avodah does draw down godliness, and it does connect godliness to the world, but not Ein Sof, not Atzmos Emahos. But the mitzvahs, the physical, they are from Atzmos Emahos. So when I do the mitzvahs with the physical, of course, I'm going to their source, Atzmos Emahos. I'm drawing it down into the world, which is, of course, the point, which is the whole way we create Mashiach, bringing the Eibishter here where he wants to be revealed, and fusing this world with Hashem.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. The Rebbe brings us in sort of like a proof, this idea of the krushim, the mishkan, is being our spiritual avodah. So the Rebbe says, like it says, that every keresh was 10 amos tall. And this is said, it's 10 amos tall. Like again, the mishkan is the macro man. The mishkan is symbolizing us. So just like a human is 10 amos, so the mishkan, the krushim, were 10 amos. Now we could say a human is 10 amos. 10 amos is 15 feet. There's not too many people walk around that are 15 feet tall. Maybe like the tallest man is, I don't know, 7 something. I don't know. Not 15 feet. Moshe Rabbeinu was 15 feet tall. He was 10 amos. I don't know anyone else. So what do we mean that, the krushim, symbolic of man, right? Because the Mishkan is symbolizing us, as we see that it's 10 amos tall. So the 10 amos is because 10 is the makeup of our spiritual reality, right? On every level, we're made up of 10 powers. 3 Chabad, 3 intellectual, and the 7 midas, the 7 emotions. So our spiritual makeup is 10. 3 plus 7 is 10. So the 10 amos are reflecting the 10 amos of man, meaning our spiritual makeup. So this is just another support for this concept that the avodah of the krushim, the avodah of the mishkan, that's my avodah, my spiritual avodah. As we said, transforming the shtus, the folly of this world, the folly of my body, the folly of my animal soul, the folly of this physicality, and turning that over, making it a godly service. The fires, like we said, the burning out, the impurities of my animal soul and body through drawing down this godly fire. That's my spiritual service, as versus the mitzvahs, which are my physical service. Another proof on the idea of the mitzvahs. So we said that we're quoting in Basi Ligani, we're going to quote from all of the Rabbeim. We know, of course, the whole Basi Ligani is quoting from the Rebbe Rayatz, and we quote from the Alter Rebbe, the Tanya concept of the Amudim, the Umdim, the Krushim, like the mitzvahs. We quoted from the Mitla Rebbe those 3 Mishalim for when something is really low. That's when you can see its power. There's also a quote here actually from the Baal Shem Tov. That idea that I just told you of the krushim being the 10 amos, the dimensions of man, that whole concept is the Baal Shem Tov. And there's also something in this ice quoting from the Maggid. So we see the Maggid says, again, so on one hand, we have the Baal Shem Tov, the krushim, the 10 amos, that's our spiritual makeup, the krushim are our spiritual makeup, the mitzvahs are our physical makeup. So the Maggid says, based on a pasuk, Ushmartim es chukosai, guard my chukim, my statutes, Vesh mishpatai, and my mishpatim, and my commandments. Asher ya'aseh osam ha'adam, asher ya'aseh osam ha'adam, that man should do them. V'chai bahem, and you'll live in them. So the Maggid says, Chukosai is when I serve Hashem with my thought. Mishpatai is when I serve Hashem with my speech. Asher ya'aseh Yasher Yaseh Behem Ha'adam, that man will do them, that's my Maisa. And that creates the Chai Behem. And then you really have life. Then you're drawing down life. So we serve Hashem with our chukosai, with our machshava, with our thoughts, mishpatai, with our deeper, with our speech. But only when it comes down to Maisa, when I serve Hashem with action, then the Chai Behem. Then there's life. Then we draw down the life of Hashem and we bring it into specifically our actions. So again, now, as I just said, when we're serving Hashem with our machshava, when we're doing mitzvahs of thought, it's a physical issue. When we're doing mitzvahs of speech, it's a physical issue. The movements of our lips is considered like an action. But just like we were talking before about the real strength of the pillar being in its most physical element, so too here, the real strength of the mitzvah from this perspective is in its ultimate Maisa application. The more physical, the better. Now, of course, we can speak of Maimarim where the more spiritual, the better. Both are true. But the point the Rebbe wants us to celebrate here is the physicality, and how through the physicality we serve Hashem. This sort of connects thinking, obviously the Rebbe in general very often shares with us this perspective. And it's a very beautiful, positive perspective on our world. Because, of course, we know that's actually one of the, I would say, innovations, one of the lights Chassid has shown, is that Hashem is in the physical. That when Chassidus first evolved, at that same time, there was definitely the movement among holy religious people to try to be as aesthetic as possible, meaning as remote from the physical as possible. Let's, not look at the world. Let's blindfold our eyes. Let's live on bread and water. And then we're going to be really, really godly. And Chassidus says, what are you doing? No. Hashem put all his powers in the physical world. You want to be really godly? You want to really serve Hashem? Use the world to serve Hashem. Of course, we have to be cautious, and we don't want to be servants of the world. We want to be masters of the world. And as mastering the physical, give it to Hashem. But we don't want to be scared of it. I'm thinking, it's connecting to a talk of the Rebbe, a Tevis talk. Today was a nice day in Chicago. but there's been a lot of cold days recently. And Tevis is the month that it's cold. It's the coldest month of the year. In English calendar, it usually comes out January, but we'll just stick with Tevis. Tevis is the coldest. And the Rebbe has a beautiful talk, a Hanukkah talk, where he connects this to what it says in the Megillah, connecting Purim to Hanukkah, that Esther was taken to the palace in the 10th month, in the month of Tevis. And on this, our Chachamim say that it's the month Shaguf Nehene Min Haguf, when the body has pleasure in the body. And Rashi explains on that it's cold. So since it's cold, you want to warm up. So a body wants a body. So that's why Achashverosh was looking for a woman in Tevis, which sounds like a very trust concept. But everything is mirroring a spiritual truth. So Shaguf Nehene Min Haguf, that a body wants a body, ultimately this reflects the relationship of Hashem and the Jewish people. Hashem is the ultimate male, and the Jewish people are the female. If this is the month, Shaguf Nehene Min Haguf, this is a month that the guf refers to essence, like the guf hadavar, the guf of halacha, the guf of Torah. So the essence, the Eibishter, desires the guf, the body of Klal Yisrael. That there's a special energy in the body, in serving Hashem as a body, which the Rebbe unpacks in the Sikha. I'm not going to go over the whole Sikha, but the Rebbe unpacks in the Sikha to mean that we can serve Hashem as a soul, which is when we're very spiritual and we're inspired and we're loving it and we're so excited to serve Hashem. And sometimes we don't feel that way. And then we serve Hashem as a body. We're not inspired, we're not spiritual, we're not loving it. And Hashem, I'm doing it anyway. And that's, you're not giving Hashem your soul, so to speak. You're not feeling your soul. You're giving Hashem your body. And Hashem says, I love that too. And in a sense, as we're saying here, you could say, I love that more. Now, why would we connect this Shaguf Nehene Min Haguf to Tevis when it's so cold? Well, the Rebbe says because the sun symbolizes Hashem, Shemesh Havaya. So when the sun is shining, Bigashmias, we won't give them up now, California. We'll say if you live in Florida, if you're living in Florida and the sun is out, you're living in Hawaii and the sun is out, you're living in Eretz Yisrael and the sun is out, it's easier to feel godliness because Shemesh Havaya Elokim. Just as the physical sun is stronger, this reflects what it reflects, that the energy of Hashem is stronger. So it's easier to be inspired. And if you live in Chicago and it's Tavis, the sun is very blocked. It's very obscured. The sun's rays are very weak. It's cold. Well, if the sun, the physical sun is weaker, the energy coming from Shemesh Havaya is weaker, so it's harder for our neshama to be ignited. And that's why in Tavis we serve Hashem as a body. But the Rebbe is saying, and again, I'm just bringing this in to show this is thematic to the Rebbe. You know, this was Maimers from Tafshin Yotes, the Sichos from many years later. But this is thematic to the Rebbe's perspective that there's a special beauty in giving Hashem your body. There's a special beauty in serving Hashem when you're not inspired. There's a special beauty in serving Hashem when you're inspired, and we would like to be inspired, and it feels better when you're inspired. And there's a special beauty in serving Hashem when you're not inspired. And that's Tavis. The sun is obscured. Shemesh Havaya is weak. My neshama is not being triggered. I'm not inspired. And Hashem, I'm doing it anyway. And the Rebbe says, why is it so special? Because, as I mentioned in this mimer, remember I brought that in to answer Javi's question, that the body has an energy in a sense beyond the neshama herself. Only the body is from the Bechira Atzmis of Hashem. The body is Hashem's free choice. The neshama is not Hashem's free choice because there's no choice. What are you going to choose between a neshama and what? There's nothing to choose between, so there's no choice. So therefore, it doesn't have the advantage of being from Hashem's free choice. But the body of Jews, there's a lot of bodies out there in this world. They all look more or less the same, a human body. And Hashem chose the body of the Jew. We know that. We celebrate that every year. Shavuos Matan Torah, Uvana v'charta mikolam v'lashon. You chose. What did you choose precisely? He chose our bodies. So that means our bodies have Bechira Atzmis. Like we were saying in this mimer, everything in the physical world is so cool and so special and so powerful. And nothing is as powerful as a physical body of a Jew. So when we're serving Hashem with our bodies, like we're not so interested, but Hashem, we're still doing it. Wow, is that powerful for Hashem? So we see that this perspective that the Rebbe is giving us here in this mimer, the advantage of the physical, the advantage of the body. Mitzvahs have a higher power than the krushim because mitzvahs are in the physical, and even Avos Hashem better be in the physical for it to be real. And the krushim, that's beautiful, but it's a spiritual avodah. This concept that the Rebbe is developing runs throughout the Torahs of the Rebbe, and it's so much our view of the world. Like we think this way naturally, because the Rebbe's been teaching this 40 plus years. That you're serving Hashem with the physical, amazing. You're serving Hashem with your body, amazing. You're not inspired and you're still serving, amazing. The more physical, the more power when we give that to Hashem, which is a great message for our door. Because we're not the most spiritual door out there, right? We're the heels. We're ikvasa de Mashiach. We're heels. Heels are non-sensitized. Heels are non-spiritual. And of course, as Chassidus says, heels have the power to go into the flames. Heels have the power of Bittul and Kabbalah soul that no other part of your body has. And that's our door, with all of the chesroinus of that and with all of the milas. So the Rebbe, being the Rebbe, looks and sees the milas. So the Rebbe is really like celebrating who we are, celebrating us being very entrenched in the physical, and saying, it's great, it's amazing, you're so powerful. Just remember to use it and give it to Hashem.